listening to the Fantasy Takeaway Podcast with Murphy Hamilton and Joe Pollock. Proud member of the Full-Time Fantasy Podcast Network. Subscribe, listen, take home the title.
What's up, Takeaway Nation? Welcome into our Week 10 recap episode. Jeff, Joe, I'm going to hijack the start of this show. I want to be a little selfish. I've got a list of players that are on several of my fantasy teams that I want to ask you guys, should I be hitting the panic button on?
How dare you hijack this show?
Whoa, I do what I want, all right? Unless Joe says no, then I don't do what I want.
No.
Well, never mind.
Moving on.
Well, I'm doing it anyway. Let's start off with Todd Gurley and Jared Goff, the Rams, basically, because you could also throw in Cooper Kupp after this 0-point performance, Robert Woods. What do you guys think about the Rams offense? Is it time to hit the panic button for fantasy?
10 of 10 panic. That offensive line is terrible. They haven't figured out how to beat 6 guys standing across the line. It's ugly, man. I own quite a few of these players, and Brandon Cooks is all but dead. Todd Gurley, you can't really start him anymore. Like, he's still getting 75% of the snaps, but they're not doing anything with them. It's ugly. And Jared Goff's a bad quarterback under pressure.
Yeah, I mean, we can kind of telegraph when Jared Goff is going to, poop down his legs. And usually it's anytime it's a top half defense or if he's on the road. So, I mean, you shouldn't be using Jared Goff if you don't have to. He's a streamer at best. And that's in pretty much any format, -2 quarterback. Gurley, I'm a little concerned about. I'd say I'm at like an 8.5 on my panic meter because I'm still willing to use Kupp. I'm still willing to use Gerald Everett. Like, these guys are still going to give you serviceable numbers, even if it doesn't mean that Jared Goff is serviceable, if that makes any sense. Todd Gurley, man, I don't know. No fourth quarter touches for him at all. He was, quote, out of the rotation, according to Sean McVay. That's ridiculous. I'm going to have to sign up Darrell Henderson really quickly.
All right, next up I got the Browns. Baker Mayfield, Odell Beckham Jr., Nick Chubb. I guess you can throw Kareem Hunt on there. I'm not quite hitting the panic button on Nick Chubb. Am I crazy for that?
Not at all.
No, the running backs, you're fine.
Just Baker and Odell.
Not great. Yeah, the passing game, you're in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, I mean, I love the backfield there. I mean, obviously, I was really high on Kareem Hunt last week for waivers. And, if you don't have him already, you need to go get him. He actually lined up all over the field. He was lined up out wide. He was in the slot. He's a fullback. He's a halfback. The attention that teams are going to have to pay him is only going to open things up more for Chubb. Both of those guys are going to be really productive players coming down the stretch with only one tough matchup against running backs, and that's against the Ravens. But it might be your championship week, so good luck.
All right, next up, Scary Terry. Now he's got Haskins the rest of the season. Are we benching him?
There's a chance Haskins is the worst quarterback we've ever seen get a starting job in the NFL. So, yes, I can't put him in my starting lineup. If he had almost anyone else throwing him the ball, like if Blake Bortles was his quarterback, I would be totally okay with Terry McLaurin. But with Haskins, I just can't do it.
So who would you play, Dwayne Haskins or Bills' Nathan Peterman? Gun to your head if you had to pick a quarterback.
I think Nathan Peterman.
I'm talking about Bills era Nathan Peterman, not like new Nathan Peterman on Hard Knocks.
Well, here's the thing about that. Like, he threw more interceptions per attempt than anyone else in the history of football. But if you went back and you watched the film on that, like 40% of them were going off of people's hands. Like, he didn't have anybody to throw the ball to. The team was terrible. If you put him on the team that the Redskins are throwing out there right now, he'd be better than Dwayne Haskins has been.
I got one. Dwayne Haskins or Jabustus Russell.
I mean, you got to pick Jamarcus Russell at this point. Wow. Like, maybe there's a world where Dwayne Haskins improves, but have you watched those games?
Look, I'm a Terry McLaurin owner. I'm praying like hell we get something out of Haskins. But I mean, he wasn't ready. We knew he was a mostly unfinished product, and he wasn't really ready to start day one, as is the case with most of these Urban Meyer quarterbacks, right? I mean, Alex Smith was kind of the prize pupil, but it could be argued that as a rookie, he wasn't ready either. And he never really became an elite option. So I'm nervous. I've got McLaurin on my bench because I have other viable options. Obviously, McLaurin was a luxury. I was able to get him off waivers, or I drafted him really late in some spots. Dwayne Haskins coming in makes me leave him on the bench unless it's an emergency.
Yeah, I'm not dropping him. I think that there's a world where Haskins improves, but right now, today, there's no way you can start McLaurin.
Yeah, and his name is F1, and the situation is scary for Terry. I just want to make sure we got the verbiage in the right order here.
Damn you, Jeff. All right, next up, Phillip Rivers. All the weapons in the world, but just can't seem to get it straight. Multiple interception games where he just seems off. Are you guys benching Phillip Rivers or putting him back on waivers and redraft?
I don't own any Phillip Rivers. If I drafted him, I've dropped him. But if Russell Okung doesn't play, Phillip Rivers is unstartable. If Russell Okung does play and it's a good matchup, I think you're fine.
I really want Rivers to be better. He's a guy that obviously has put up a lot of fantasy points for a long time, but for whatever reason, he could not throw it to number 25 for the Raiders. Was it Eric Harris was the kid's name on Thursday night?
Had like 3 picks, but 1 taken away by penalty.
Yeah, that kid, I don't know, man. He had like Predator's invisibility cloak on. Like, I don't know what the story was there. But yeah, he just couldn't not find that kid. He was completing more passes to that guy than anybody else. I don't know. I got to believe he's still a serviceable use, especially in 2 quarterback leagues. But I mean, he's a streaming option in single quarterback. Let's be clear about the role.
All right. And finally, I have Juju Smith-Schuster. This was just a weird weekend. All the hype between the him versus Ramsey matchup and him admitting, no, I'm not Antonio Brown. I just want to throw him on this list because I own him in a few dynasties and I'm actually wary of playing him every week now.
Yeah, Mason Rudolph's not a good quarterback, and he seems to only have eyes for Deontay Johnson and Jalen Samuels out of the backfield, I guess. But I think if you have other options, you have to sit Juju Smith-Schuster at this point.
Yeah, it's a shame. He was my wide receiver 1 coming into the year. The volume with Big Ben in there, but what that offense is supposed to be looked so incredible. But he's not Antonio Brown because he doesn't wear a red squeaky nose around town. So I don't know if that's a, hey, I'm not as good as AB, or if that's just kind of a, hey, I have a different personality set, because he does. I think he's still a good player. You can't drop him, but man, if you've got a better option, fire him up.
If you can still get somebody that believes that offense is going to get better, I would trade him if you still can before your deadline.
All right, guys, that's all the players I had on my list. Let's dive into the show. There isn't really any news, so we're going to skip our news and notes segment. So let's dive right on into our cheap date review. Jeff, we're going to start with you. How did the Bengals stack do for you this week?
Sadly, it was the best part of my lineup. I wish I was kidding.
It feels really awkward to say, doesn't it?
It does. Well, I mean, I got 10 out of Eifert, and I was actually pretty excited about that because I did get the touchdown. So pretty thrilled about that, because for what I paid for him, that could have been a lot worse. All the interceptions out of Finley really hurt. He only got me on like 13. Not even. He got me 11. 10.88. He didn't give me very much. But again, super cheap quarterback. Joe Mixon, though, dropped 20 for me. I went with that Bengals stack to save a bunch of money so I could pay up for Marlon Mack against the Dolphins. Dolphins pull out a second win in a row, shut down the run game. Didn't work out. Saquon Barkley, he got shut down 1 yard rushing, 8.1 points, killed me. The Giants defense, by extension, got crushed 1 point. The whole lineup was pretty much garbage. Even Chris Godwin only gave me 13, except for my 3 Bengals. They were 3 of my better players in the whole lineup. The whole thing is just sickening.
You didn't get better than 2x out of any player that doesn't play for the Cincinnati Bengals.
You reverse cursed yourself. We thought the Bengals were going to crack the bed for you, but everybody else did except for them. That's the worst.
It's so funny. The whole thing is hilarious. Like, you got 2.27 out of Finley, 4.28 out of Joe Mixon, and 3.33 out of Tyler Eifert. You didn't get better than 2x out of anybody else. You will out of Emmanuel Sanders, I think, but still.
Yeah, I mean, what are you going to do, right? It's just kind of I didn't run a lineup, anything even like that in any of my actual DFS lineups. I did come out positive on, cash wise this week, but yeah, I didn't run any of those guys. That's kind of one of the deals, right? We do the cheap dates to try and just give you a sense of what some lineups can look like, but we also try not to pick the same cheap players, right? So I would argue that after we go through all 3 teams, the guys that we were unanimously into all kind of underperformed.
We're on to Cincinnati.
Thanks, Coach.
All right, actually, we're on to you, Joe. You won this week. I'm going to go ahead and spoil that for the listeners. Where do you think you succeeded the most?
Dalvin Cook, for sure. The paying up for both of the elite running backs was a solid play here. I got right around 60 points out of the 2 of them. Devin Singletary, I thought was in a smash spot, and he was terrible. Phillip Rivers, not good. Mike Williams, not good. Zach Pascal, I think that if we made this show on Saturday, I actually would have replaced Zach Pascal with Darius Slayton in this lineup because on Friday, Mark Wemkin and I of the Roto Bros podcast did a little bonus episode that we released on our podcast feed. And I talked up Darius Slayton quite a bit. He was an absolute smash play. So this lineup could have been a lot better if I would have done that. And I probably would have, considering Brian Hoyer was ruled out, Jacoby Brissett was ruled out. Brian Hoyer was in. So could have been really good. I scored 130 points, but it could have been really solid. The Cardinals defense at 9 points was super solid. Not great, but solid.
You were almost right with what you said, Brian Hoyer being out. He was there, but he wasn't there. He was my cheap day quarterback, 9.16. I did the worst among all of us on quarterbacks, which is crazy because you wouldn't think Miami would play as good as they did, but pulled out a second win and dashed my dreams to the ground. Joe, you and I both played Jamison Crowder. You as your cheap date. Me, I was just on the bandwagon. 19.1, I'm pretty proud of that. Josh Jacobs did great this week. I think that I'm rolling him out depending on price a lot going forward because he's
much more expensive starting this week. Probably. All of these players, we should mention that. Like going into this week and trying to do cheap dates, Thursday is gonna be rough because I went in and I looked at the pricing and like Alvin Kamara fell by like $600. There were a few other players that dropped by $100 or two. Everyone else is priced up. This might be the hardest slate for DK this coming week that I've ever seen.
Gross.
Yep.
Well, I did do pretty well on Damian Williams, 14.9 points. I got aided by the last minute McCoy being inactive as kind of a healthy scratch week. So I'm not really going to take a ton of credit on that, but happy about it. Devontae Parker was my cheap day wide receiver, 11.9. Respectable, but not great. I'm very proud of my Michael Thomas call. I wasn't 100% right on my play all your players in this game for the Saints and Falcons, but Michael Thomas and my flex, 31.2, is the only thing that kept me going close to you, Joe.
This was actually a battle up until the last minute. Like, I needed Irv Smith and Dalvin Cook to put up all the points that they did on Sunday Night Football to beat you.
Yeah, and my tight end was Cameron Brate. That was kind of a bad call. I didn't expect it to be O.J. Howard week, though everybody else was expecting it to be O.J. Howard week. That was a bomb on my part.
I mean, guys, I still have Manny Sanders going. He could easily score 75 points in this game and bring me right back into it.
I'm going to need you to calm down.
You only need 45 points out of him. That's totally, or 55. It's like 55 points. I think we can do it. Let's do it.
We'll
Look,
will
he
it
can
into
score
existence.
55 if the defense for the Niners can score like 30 points. Then I'll be content.
Yeah, sounds good.
Booth review.
All right, it's our booth review segment. We're going to talk about our what to watch for from last week. Joe, you're up first. What was your first booth review?
An apology.
Finally.
Yeah, Bills Browns, man. The Browns won the game. What the hell was that? That was the worst football game I've seen in forever.
Hashtag free Todd Monken, man.
I'm glad you didn't bet your house, Murph.
No. All right, Jeff, we're over to you. What was your first booth review?
You know, I had the Raiders and Chargers on Thursday, and my big thing for this game is that it's weed out season, right? Who's going to step up and make that wild card push? And the Raiders looked like a real playoff caliber team. They played tough against what we believe to be a pretty good Chargers squad, and they played them hard for all 60 minutes, and it paid off in the end, got them that W, and they're very much in the thick of the playoff race. Meanwhile, the Chargers, they don't look very good right now, and that loss pushes them to the brink where they need a lot of help if they even want to sniff the wild card. It could mean some big changes in LA sooner rather than later.
I think both of these football teams are bad. Watching that game, I don't think either of these football teams are going to be competitive late into December and January.
I don't know, man. The Raiders run the ball really well. They've been playing good enough on defense. They're not great at anything. That's the thing. They're not great at anything. They're just kind of good at a bunch of stuff. And they're just good enough where they can make somebody's life miserable. And the Raiders had a pretty cushy schedule down the stretch, if I'm not mistaken. Let me see if I can pull that up. Bengals are up next, then the Jets. You've got the Chiefs are going to be tough. The Titans are pretty tough. The Jaguars, we don't really know what they are. They're kind of hit and miss any given week. The Chargers again, and then the Broncos. They could legitimately make a run at not only a wild card, but if Kansas City continues to stumble the way they did against Tennessee, this might get really interesting in the last couple weeks of the year.
It might. I still think they're a bad football team, and they're going to lose some of those games you think they're going to win.
Could be, but they, like I said, they just do some things well, and they run the ball. And that's how you win games in December and January. So we'll see. We will see. It's going to be interesting, but this win definitely pushes the Chargers to a bad place and the Raiders into a pretty decent one.
All right. Well, my first booth review is similar to Joe's. It's an apology. I said start all your studs in the Saints-Falcons game, and while I was right in some places, I was not right enough to take full credit on this one. If you had, Alvin Kamara get you 10 points and you needed that, that's fine. But, I mean, outside of Michael Thomas and the Falcons players, you were really disappointed. If you started Drew Brees, you weren't happy. This game was a stunner, though. Even broadcasters, everybody I've seen online, this was confusing. No one expected the Falcons to just demolish the Saints like they did. It was astounding.
It's literally you and everyone else in the industry. This was like the second most stacked game out there, and it was a total poop fest. Like Julio Jones only had 11 points.
This game was actually really interesting for the things we couldn't see. So we talked about the coaching changes in Atlanta. I want to say it was last week.
Yeah.
They got Raheem Morris back in the secondary. They kind of shuffled up the staff a little bit. They're also doing some different things with their play calling. Jeff Ulbrich, the
Dan
linebackers.
Quinn not calling the plays anymore was huge.
Right. Jeff Ulbrich, the linebackers coach, is now calling first and second down, with Raheem Morris calling third down. And what's funny about that is you got your defensive backs coach calling plays against defined pass plays, and it shut Drew Brees down. The Atlanta team was talented. We thought about it in the preseason as being a pretty decent squad. Calvin Ridley and Hooper, and they had good players on defense. Like, they were supposed to be really competitive. Now that they've got the coaching staff right, they might be a spoiler team in the back half.
I'm in this chat with like a ton of fantasy football players, like good ones. And the overarching theme in that chat while that was going on was, why did they rush Drew Brees back? We should have Jacoby Brissett in there. He'd be doing better for our fantasy players. And I'm like, come on. He's 17 for 20 right now. The defense is just playing really well and stopping everything when it's caught.
Right. And I think we mean Teddy Bridgewater there, too.
Yeah.
Because if they brought in Jacoby Brissett after the trade deadline, somebody would be pissed.
That would be hard.
All right, Jeff, we're back to you. What was your second booth review?
Mine's actually the game we're watching right now. At the end of the first quarter, Niners are beating Seattle 10-0. And I expect this game to be pretty close when it's all said and done. Seattle's going to be the best and biggest test to the Niners' undefeated season. But this begins a run that's going to be pretty trying for that defense. You get two matchups against Russell Wilson, one against Aaron Rodgers, one against Drew Brees, one against Lamar Jackson. So really psyched to see how this one goes down, although I really just want more Niners W's.
All right, we're back to me, and I was watching the cheese triplets, the Aarons and Adams duo, but it was just a weird game for Aaron Rodgers. Sorry, the frustration in my voice is there because I played Aaron Rodgers, and it's just disappointing. But I did have Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones salvaged my fantasy day and crushed it. I don't really know how to describe this game. I mean, the Panthers defense is not that bad. So it was kind of one of those things where you hoped for good things, but you could also see this coming.
If you had Aaron Rodgers and Aaron Jones scored as many touchdowns as he did, there was like a 75% chance that Aaron Rodgers was going to poop the bed, though, because they were most likely going to be rushing touchdowns.
I mean, he's had the odd, passing touchdown to Aaron Jones to make the double dip real nice, but that's what I was hoping for, honestly.
Sure, but like you got 3 touchdowns out of your running back. It pretty much evened out.
For sure.
I think we should start calling Aaron, and Adams AAA. Because, I mean, if they're nearby, they're probably going to help you in an emergency.
Maybe.
Maybe.
I feel like if we start referring to Aaron Rodgers in a AAA type joke, that State Farm might take offense to that.
Screw State Farm. I'm tired of their commercials. Make something new.
Well, why do you think they brought on Mahomes? Because they can protect his Mahomes and Auto?
Oh, God.
Dude, I love that line in that commercial.
It's terrible.
It's wordcraft.
I feel like State Farm has seen the Flow commercials from Progressive for the last half decade, and they're like, we can do one that'll last that long. And it's like, nah, it's not Flow. Calm down. Those are genius commercials.
I mean, I was always a Jamie fan, and I didn't like Flow as much.
Everybody likes Jamie. Come on. All right, we got off the rails here. Joe, we're back to you with the final booth review.
My last one was Vikings at Cowboys, and I don't really have much to say about it. It was a fantastic football game. It's one of those games that if you didn't see it live, you should go back and watch the condensed game on Game Pass because it was fantastic. Great football. Came down to the wire. Just good stuff all around. Good fantasy production for most of the fantasy weapons. Love it.
Yeah, that game was amazing. I wanted to go to bed so badly, but it was so good I couldn't do it. So I just stayed on my couch, just watching that thing and hoping like heck it didn't go to overtime for any reason.
Almost did too. Could have really easily.
When Dalvin Cook bobbled that pitch at the end of the game, my heart sank. I was like, oh God, what's happening? Why are you calling a toss play at this juncture of the game?
The takeaway.
All right, the takeaway, our other takeaways from the weekend that we didn't talk about in our what to watch fors. Joe, you have one in the script here, and it's kind of the one I wanted to talk about first. Are the Ravens the best team in football is what you have written here. I also want to add, is Lamar Jackson the biggest threat under center in football right now?
I think if you find a way to stop him on the ground and you have secondary coverage that can lock people up in man, there's a world where you can stop Lamar Jackson based on his inability to throw the ball into tight windows. But that's a tall order. He might be the best running back in football that can actually throw the ball downfield.
You know, I don't think the Ravens are the best team in football. I think they're really, really good. And Lamar Jackson should be considered the leader in the clubhouse for being the MVP. He doesn't throw a ton into tight windows, usually because he doesn't have to. But his average yards of separation, per attempt, that comes in at just under 1.5 yards. So the guy with the most separation per target is actually Case Keenum at 2.14 yards among qualifying quarterbacks. Lamar Jackson's basically in the top third of the league still in terms of that metric. So he'll throw it into windows and he's completing a reasonable number of them. What he's not getting is a ton of attempts. He's running it so often that he's effectively a top flight running back still. That's got to end at some point, I would think. I figure if teams go back and start watching the 2012 49ers, how teams managed to corral Kaepernick, that's going to be what they're going to have to try and do to corral Lamar Jackson. Because you're not going to stop him. You can only slow him down.
He's so good, though. Like, that spin move was actually Michael Vick from Madden. Like, that's what it was. He looked like a video game.
Dirty.
It was crazy.
That poor Bengals player's ankles.
Dude, my ankles hurt just watching that play.
Yeah, that was dirty. I mean, I loved it. And I've got Lamar Jackson in a few spots, so I'm pretty happy with that production. But as much as I love him for fantasy, he still has a little bit more growing up to do passing wise. But he's good. I mean, he's much better passer than Vic was. He's a much better passer than Kaepernick was. He's in a position where we're seeing the maturation of a quarterback that could be in 3 or 4 years the most dangerous dual threat quarterback the league has ever seen.
I think also there's just almost no way to defend having 2 or 3 tight ends on the field with good to decent receivers on the outside with a running quarterback that can run the football like he can. Like, how you can't put enough linebackers in the game. You can't tackle all these guys with safeties, and you can't catch up with them with defensive linemen. So there's just really no way that I've ever seen anyone stop a threat like this.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting. I think what you're going to have to do with him is it's going to, and again, I don't know. NFL coaches have been trying to figure it out all year, so I'm sure I don't have all the answers either. But my thought is you're not really going to be able to go man coverage there. You may have to sit on zone and have to have a lot of players, linebackers, defensive backs, and figure out a way to get some kind of containment with only 5 guys. You need 6 guys back in a zone. You need 5 guys getting after the quarterback with 2 of them on contain, 3 actually applying pressure. It's not ideal, and it's going to leave lanes open for guys like Mark Ingram, and it creates other problems. But that might be your only shot at really just putting a fence around him so that he doesn't blow you up for 303 and then run for another 102.
He's going to change how all the teams in that division draft defensive players because it's a totally different ballgame.
He's going to change the way teams evaluate quarterbacks. Like, I think there's a bigger change at hand here. A few years back, before guys like, Zeke and Gurley and Fournette and all these running backs were starting to get drafted high, we hadn't seen a running back in the first round in years. And then it was, well, these mobile quarterbacks, they can't really throw. Lamar Jackson slips to the bottom of the first round after arguably he should have been a 2-time Heisman Trophy winner or near it. Like, this guy's incredible in college. He's done all kinds of wonderful things as an athlete and as a quarterback. But the NFL and its blinders that they have on for running quarterbacks shuffled him to the back end of the first round. The Ravens were able to build an offense tailor suited to him. But I expect more teams to copy that and start seeing more of these athletic quarterbacks get more of a chance at the next level.
You bring up the Heisman. Wasn't that triple option with the 3 Heisman winners kind of cool? That was intense.
Yeah, it was sweet.
It really was.
All right, Jeff, you got any takeaways from the week?
Nothing that really stands out. There was a few pieces that I kind of sat back and went, huh? And that was, we already talked about the Browns and Bills a little bit, but that was the one game where I just kind of sat back and was like, huh, okay, well, there it is. It's just another bad football game. We still don't know what the Browns are going to be on offense from week to week. I'm just hoping there's more Kareem Hunt because I did invest in him pretty deeply.
This was such a strange week overall for fantasy football. The chalk pooped the bed in DFS left and right. You're looking at Christian Kirk as the number one wide receiver, Derrick Henry as the number one running back, and Daniel Jones hit the number 2 quarterback spot. Like, what is going on right now?
Yeah, I mean, the last 4 weeks or so have been like that. I think since about week 6, we've seen a lot of these really just unusual, quote, weeks. But we run into this every year where you get 3 or 4 really weird weeks a year. They usually don't happen back to back to back. But we're getting ready to settle back in and start seeing some of those elite players really show off who they are as teams get geared up to, make their playoff push. And, the cream always rises to the top. So I think we're going to start seeing some of the better players and the better teams really establish themselves in the next few weeks. That's what I'm looking forward to.
Guys, I think my biggest takeaway from the week is that the poop bowl was actually the Lions and the Bears. While there are other games in the week that we've talked about being really weird or, apologizing for me and Joe in the booth reviews segment, this game was atrocious. Trubisky is not a good quarterback. The Lions defense only needed to play moderately well to win this game, and they couldn't do that. They allowed him to throw 3 touchdowns. I get they had a backup in because Stafford was out, but they still scored 13 points. In a realistic world where if you score 14 on the Bears, you could probably win the game, the Lions prove that they are not a good football team. It is no longer a flaccid maybe. It is a full-on yes.
I'm glad it's no longer a flaccid maybe. And yeah, I think we've known for a while that Trubisky isn't really the guy. And Matt Nagy as a play caller has probably been exposed a little bit. The inability to figure out how to use Tariq Cohen is just baffling. Not being able to figure out how to use Montgomery, baffling. Like, he has weapons on this offense. I don't understand where the play calling, quote, genius went. And we also need to quit throwing that term around when somebody has a big year. Somebody goes out, has one great year play calling, and suddenly he's a genius. And we've branded like 6 or 7 different guys offensive geniuses the last few years. We need to pump the brakes. I want to see a guy go 3 or 4 years before I start calling them geniuses.
Adam Gase.
Dude, Adam Gase. Good.
It's the best example of what you just said. I mean, a couple of good offensive seasons with Peyton Manning, and then he's suddenly like a head coaching guru. Now he's been with what? The Bears, the Dolphins, now the Jets, and sucked everywhere.
Yeah, he's call sign crazy eyes. That's where we're at with that guy.
I wish they could throw Gase in at quarterback. No one could follow his eyes.
Back there just head bobbling around, looking around and stuff like he's Stevie Wonder or something.
Tapping the wire.
All right, time to tap the waiver wire. Don't really have anybody listed for quarterback. I'd say, you can look for Brandon Allen. Nick Foles might still be on the waivers if you're really desperate. Just want to throw those names out there.
Be careful with Brandon Allen. Drew Lock was activated today. I don't know how long Brandon Allen's going to be a starter.
2 weeks.
We'll see.
All right, let's move into running backs. We've got Brian Hill out of Atlanta with Devonta Freeman missing at least 2 weeks, and Darrell Henderson, who Jeff already alluded to with Gurley's workload missing the entire fourth quarter. These are definitely guys you want to pick up.
Yeah, and Hill should be looked at exclusively as a short-term fix. This is going to be a 2 to 3 week window unless he really, really impresses. But if you're picking him up and the thought is you're going to use him to get you to a championship, you need to think again. This is literally a this week, next week, roll the dice.
Unless he's Cam Newton. Devonta Freeman might be Cam Newton and have a sprained foot that requires surgery 8 weeks down the road.
Well, I have a theory as to why Cam's not actually healing up, but I don't have any scientific evidence to back it up yet, so I'm going to keep it to myself.
All right, Joe, any low-owned guys at running back?
I actually don't have any running backs this week. The pool is very thin, but I've got some wide receivers coming up.
Gotcha. All right, then we're moving into wide receivers. We got Darius Slayton, Deontay Johnson, Hunter Renfrow, and Mecole Hardman. I'm so happy to see Hunter Renfrow on this list.
You're welcome.
I feel like he was on the low-owned guys list last week, wasn't he?
Yeah, I think he was.
Yeah, I think he was, yeah.
I've been crushing those lately, man. Like, I'm getting people on the rise has been something that I've been really trying to do on this show, and I think it's working out pretty well.
I mean, is your shoulder hurt? I mean, did you dislocate it, patting yourself on the back there? I'm curious.
Yes. I'm in a lot of pain right now.
We better get you an ice pack.
I don't know why I got Peyton Manning from that NFL 100 commercial. It's like, you still got it. No, that hurt.
Do you think that Darius Slayton dies if Sterling Shepard comes back and when Evan Ingram comes back?
I didn't watch enough of that game to really to give you a good opinion there. I saw maybe like 5 or 6 plays of that, but I was too busy with too many other games to get a chance to really sit and watch that one.
I mean, it's possible, but isn't Sterling Shepard like one more concussion away from just being done in the NFL at this point?
Yeah, he's having trouble getting through the protocol too, so it might be a while. We'll see. It sucks watching guys go through that.
I think with their record, they should just shut him down, call it a day, get into evaluation mode on some of your other players, because that team is, they're not going anywhere. So I don't know what the rush would be to, push him back onto the field for what? To push yourself back in the draft 4 or 5 more slots? That's ridiculous.
Deontay Johnson kind of feels obvious. He's got a pretty good chemistry with Mason Rudolph. Hunter Renfrow, like I said, I'm happy to see him on this list. He's getting more and more work. I don't think he's going to be a home run type guy, but a safe flex play. And Mecole, I mean, Jeff, you have here, might be a guy to have versus New England and Denver. Care to throw your analysis on that?
Yeah, so here's the deal. I mean, Kansas City's got a bye week coming up, so this isn't the kind of guy, again, you're grabbing to stash for the rest of the year. You're looking at him in matchup positions. So I look at New England, they were exposed a little bit against Baltimore, but Kansas City's got Tyreek Hill in, and that's where Stephon Gilmore is going to be. The rest of those corners are good, but not great. And with the way they use Hardman, bouncing him around the lineup a little bit, I expect him to be the kind of gadget player that suddenly sees 6 or 7 touches, and one of them becomes a touchdown. Denver is a similar situation where they're going to have Chris Harris is going to be, trying to cover Tyreek Hill, because he's going to be the one, and they'll bounce him all over. And then Hardman's going to be coming out of the backfield, out of the slot, from the outside. You can't double up Hill, and you can't also put a second body over Hardman. One of those guys is going to beat you deep on any given week. I expect those 2 teams to try and take Hill away and make Hardman beat him.
Last year, Hill got the 2, and Gilmore was on the other receiver for the whole game.
That other receiver still won't be Hardman. He'll be the 3 in the offense.
For sure.
So that's where it still opens up those looks.
I don't mind it as a pickup, but I think it's a terrible dart throw if you're not in a super deep league, because he's getting by on touchdown upside. Like, his floor is literally 0 points and he's playing 20% of the snaps.
Oh, absolutely. And that's where I'm like, I'm not grabbing him for a championship run. I'm grabbing him because I need somebody to fill in either a bye week, or I need to fill in for an injury. Like, he is a desperation play. And I want to make clear that you're assuming he's only going to get between 1 and 5 touches at most. 5's his ceiling. Like, this isn't a high number, but he's a home run hitter in the same mold as Tyreek Hill. And any one of those 5 touches can go to the house at any given time. So you're really rolling the dice on upside. It's a play to win kind of move, where if you don't have a player in place with a great floor, he might be an upside play that you can stick in there and hope for the best.
All right, Joe, throw those low-end guys at me.
Russell Gage played 62% of the snaps again. He is the primary slot receiver in that offense. Austin Hooper has an MCL sprain. Devonta Freeman, we've already talked about. There are a lot of pass catchers missing from this offense. And from what I've seen, Russell Gage is a pretty good football player. Another guy that's really lowly owned, probably not ownable in most leagues, but is getting a snap share, is Andre Patton for the Chargers. If that offense ever gets together and he continues to get 80% of the snaps, he might be an okay emergency play. And then Josh Reynolds is still a guy that we need to talk about. He outsnapped Cooper Kupp with Brandon Cooks out, so he's a guy that you can look at. And Zay Jones didn't play terrible in that Thursday night game. I think you could do worse than him as a back of your bench flyer.
Not somebody that's going to run through a glass door for your team, right?
I mean, he will run through a glass door, but he might not do it for your team.
And he may not have clothes on.
Maybe not.
All right, let's move into tight ends. We've got O.J. Howard and Rudolph the Red Zone Reindeer. Who wrote that?
Yes.
Who do you think wrote that?
Of course. Sir Dad joke over there.
I mean, O.J. Howard's season may have come and gone before we all realized it this past week, but these matchups coming down the stretch are all pretty cake for tight ends for O.J. Howard. So with the exception of weeks 11 and 16, so weeks 12 through 15, they're all soft defenses versus the tight end. He's an athletic guy. We know what he can do and what he's capable of. And in a week when, you didn't see a ton out of Evans, you didn't see a ton out of Godwin, it might be just what fantasy owners are looking for, is a relatively cheap tight end to stream in place of Austin Hooper or somebody else that should have the matchups needed to put up a few fantasy points.
All right, Joe, any low-owned tight ends?
Yeah, it's just one on this list, and he's like super deep, like scraping the bottom of the barrel in a 2 tight end 16-team league. It's Jaden Graham of the Falcons. If Austin Hooper misses time, Jaden Graham he's caught some balls in the preseason. He looks like he's going to be the pass-catching tight end. Luke Stalker will be the blocking tight end. I think Russell Gage gets most of the benefit if Austin Hooper misses time, but you could do worse as a deep league stash than Jaden Graham.
Hey, how about another guy? I keep hearing his name bandied about, and that's Mike Gesicki.
Gross.
Very gross.
That's kind of what I thought. And I know there's a lot of other analysts out there that I see on Twitter and other places where they're talking about this guy as somebody to go get and stash and keep, and might be a waiver wire play and somebody to have in the playoffs. I don't love it. I think this is fantasy fool's gold. So I just want to make sure people are aware that the last 2 weeks are the only 2 week stretch Gesicki has seen more than 5 targets in back-to-back weeks. And to be fair, he didn't really do much with them. This is still a bad Dolphins offense despite the 2-game win streak. Do not buy into this hype. Let somebody else make that mistake. He's got really rough matchups down the stretch. So this is going to be something where you don't need him. Let him sit on the wire.
I could not believe that he was the chalk in DFS this week. Like, the field is getting smarter, but come on, guys. You outsmarted yourself with that one. He was like a tournament dart throw, and you're giving him the chalk in cash? That's not okay. Come on.
Oh, agreed.
All right, guys, that'll do it for our Week 10 recap episode. Jeff, you didn't make very many dad jokes, minus the ones you put in the script. I'm proud of you.
I mean, I was busy watching the 49ers game, and I've been reliving my Five Guys burger I had for dinner, so I'm kind of struggling at the moment.
Gonna hold the jokes in because they're all there for Five Guys right now.
Oh, yeah.
Not just the jokes from the sounds of it.
Yeah. Double bacon cheeseburger, man. Woo.
And we're done.
All right, guys, we'll be back on Thursday with our Week 11 preview, all the good stuff that goes with it. For Jeff at NFL_DiMatteo, for Joe at Human Stat Sheet on Twitter, and of course myself at MurphyFFT, or find us all in the NFL Fantasy Football Discussion Group on Facebook. Bye, guys.
Later.
Don't get Mike Gesicki.
Thanks for listening to the Fantasy Takeaway Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And follow the show on Twitter at FF Takeaway.
Jeff has 5 guys inside him. There, I said it.
Oh, no.
You guys are the worst.
That was pretty terrible.
Or we're the best.